welcome back to the show. You just got done hearing my interview with Michael Romeo of Symphony X, talking about his sophomore solo album War of the Worlds Part 2, which is coming out this Friday through Inside Out Music. And now that we got that interview out of the way, it's time to be talking about some brand new albums that have been coming out in this week or the previous weeks. We got 6 brand new albums for you to be able to check out here, and of course, as usual, going in alphabetical order. Starting things off first, we get into some black metal, and on this album, very much some black and roll, with the latest solo album from the band and frontman known as Abbath, and his brand new album Dread Reaver, coming out this Friday through Season of Mist. This album is just chock full of everything that you love about Abbath. It's got the black metal, it's got his patented vocals on it. This album feels a lot more streamlined, I guess would be the word that I would use. I mean, it's a little more straightforward ahead on this album compared to other albums. I mean, you definitely know what you're getting with this album, with like some straight ahead black metal and a lot more Motorhead influence than I ever would have imagined. I mean, especially towards the end of the album, it really starts to sound like Abbath is doing his best Lemmy impersonation and really incorporating that into his vocals. Maybe that's just the way his voice is just becoming now. Maybe he's just becoming Lemmy, but it really sounds like Motorhead in some parts. And an unexpected twist on this album, especially if you don't know anything about this solo album ahead of time, is that Abbath covers Trapped Under Ice by Metallica, which I was totally not expecting, and really adds more of that blackened thrash that I was not expecting on this album at all, but he does it with such justice. And it was really cool to hear. Very different. Very much took me by surprise. But I really enjoy his cover of it. And overall, I think it's just a definitive Abbath album in 2022. It doesn't overstay its welcome. No songs go on longer than they need to. Just everything feels right on this album. It's the right kind of Abbath album. And hopefully you'll check it out this week on Season of Mist. Of course, that album again is known as Dread Reaver. Going into the absolute opposite end of the spectrum, we got Animals as Leaders with Perhesia. That's coming out this week through Sumerian Records. And again, with Animals as Leaders, I mean, this probably won't be the album that will make you a fan of the band if you haven't already checked them out, or if you weren't sold on them already, but it is an absolutely solid album from start to finish. I mean, it really starts to incorporate more of that jazz influence more than just metal, which I do appreciate. And, you know, when you are an instrumental band, I mean, you already have a limited fan base because people are expecting some kind of vocals, and when you do an instrumental band, it can take a lot of things away from the casual listener. But on this album, I mean, if you really do appreciate guitar, bass, and drums, this has everything covered in strides. Everyone in this band is just showing off the best that they possibly can be, and you know, you get those really heavy lows from those low-string guitars. The bass sound that isn't quite bass, but might as well be bass. The drums are absolutely amazing. I mean, all 3 of these guys are just absolutely playing their hearts out, and it's just so great to see that. And with the diversity that's really going on throughout this album, too, when you really start to incorporate more of that instrumental prog and jazz and, you know, just that rubber band theory of being able to stretch out your sound but being able to snap right back when you need to. That's what Animals as Leaders is in a nutshell. And whether they get as heavy as Meshuggah or they basically do Miles Davis without a brass section, Animals as Leaders is really pulling it off in 2022. And if that's up your style, yeah, go check this one out, coming out this week on Sumerian Records. Then for an album that just came out this past Friday through Century Media, it is the brand new album from Dark Funeral, We Are the Apocalypse. And I didn't realize how divisive of an album this was. I really see people saying that this is either the best Dark Funeral album to date, or it's not good at all. I've seen nothing in between. While I won't say it's my favorite Dark Funeral album, their previous album is my favorite Dark Funeral album. The production on that album is absolutely stellar. The songwriting is impeccable. Everything that black metal should be, if you're doing more of that straight ahead black metal like Dark Funeral does, is just encapsulated throughout that entire album. Whereas here, again, kind of like what I mentioned with Abbath, it's a little more streamlined. You know, a lot of the songs can start to sound the same. time. But that's not a bad thing if you like this style of music. I mean, it's got that great atmosphere behind it. The production's not my favorite thing on this album. It's a little too raw and unmixed for my personal taste to make it my favorite Dark Funeral album, but there's such great songs on here, I think that can really bypass everything if you're willing to give them the chance. And for a band that's been around as long as Dark Funeral has, I think they have the right to be able to make any kind of sound that they want to. And on We Are the Apocalypse, they've decided to be Dark Funeral, and it works. If you like that traditional, more raw, second wave black metal, Dark Funeral has always been that kind of band. And in 2022, they really showcase here what they're all about when it comes to that traditional, old school black metal sound. And if you want to hear what the pioneers of that second wave of black metal sounds like, always check this one out. It's available now on Century Media. Next up is the album that we just got done talking about in my interview with Michael Romeo, and his sophomore solo album, War of the Worlds Part 2, coming out this Friday through Inside Out Music. And this shows Michael Romeo and why he is one of the most underrated guitarists of all time. And I truly, truly mean that. While some of the bigger names out there obviously have earned their reputations for what they have, Michael Romeo has always been kind of in the background for a lot of neoclassical, progressive rock, progressive metal guitarists. And I never understood why. And I really hope with this album, that might change things to show him as the undeniable master of the guitar. And not just the guitar either, but just like the songwriting and everything that goes along with it. I mean, he's got an absolutely stellar lineup here. And of course, Dino on vocal, one of the best vocalists in the world right now. And just hearing him do this album is just so incredibly well done. And of course, everyone in the band is absolutely killing it here. And just hearing Michael Romeo go into different instrumentation than what he's used to, going into 7th string for the first time, going into so many different territories that you wouldn't necessarily expect from Michael Romeo, and then other things that you will absolutely blow your mind. This is gonna be a prog metal album to contend with, and there's been a lot of great prog that's already come out this year, and I'm so excited to see what's gonna be coming out for the rest of the year. But this is a strong contender for prog metal in 2022, and if you like the interview, and you like the way I just described this album, be going out of your way to check this album out this Friday on Inside Out Music. Next up is the band Oddland with their album Vermilion. That has just come out this past Friday through Uprising Records. And this is just another killer prog metal album like I just talked about with Michael Romeo, but in a very different style. Whereas Michael Romeo is a little bit more traditional when it comes to the progressive rock and progressive metal stylings, Oddland is a lot more of the contemporary progressive metal sound. And by that, I mean a lot of down-tuned guitars, more of that djenty sound, but they also showcase so many different sides. The vocal patterns on this album are just jaw-dropping, the songwriting is just so killer. It almost feels like it's an odd mix between something like Faith No More and Meshuggah, kind of like what 12 Foot Ninja used to do, but done in a much different way. There's some moments on here that really bring back that nice acoustic element that you'll hear in something like Opeth or Porcupine Tree, and then all of a sudden it just gets into that heavy Periphery, Meshuggah, Tesseract kind of tones going on, and half of the album encapsulates in one song, Vermilion, split over several tracks. And then the rest of the album is other tracks that aren't connected, but really feel connected musically, and it's so cool to see that. This album is quite a shock for the system. I think anyone that's like looking for that down-tuned progressive metal sound that does not sound like many contemporaries that are still doing that modern progressive metal sound, I highly suggest you check out Oddland. These guys have been around for a while, and I've enjoyed all of their work so far, and that's no exception here with Vermilion, which is out now through Uprising Records. And finally, rounding out this progressive metal route, and also the last album I'll be checking out this week for your accompanying ears, is Without Waves with Comedian, which is out now through Prosthetic Records. I didn't even realize it until now, but I actually played a show with these guys, and they're probably the biggest band that I've ever played a show with. Also, could be one of the last bands that I ever played a show with, but that's a different tale for a different time. 2017 marks the last time that they had an album come out, and now with Comedian, they've really been able to showcase what kind of band they really are. are. If a band like this can go from the extremes of showing something like Dillinger Escape Plan, to the melodicness of Devin Townsend, to the acoustic side of Porcupine Tree, you absolutely have my attention, and then some. I remember these guys being absolutely killer live, and with this album, they've really grown. Everyone in the band has grown so much in this band, and it's just so cool to see that. This is going to be a very underrated progressive metal album, and I really think people need to check this one out because there's so many different sides of this band that I love. And I think you could as well too. I mean, especially eveness mixed with melodicness, messed with dynamics, messed with all different kinds of genre changes that fit together so very, very well. And if this sounds like something that could be up your alley, I highly recommend it, and I think it's going to be very high up come my end of the year list. As long as I don't forget it, neither do you. I don't want this to just be an underrated record. I want this to be an album people remember this year, and I hope you do check it out because it is out now through Prosthetic Records with the band Without Waves and the album Comedian. If you're just checking this out on YouTube, just the album version, thank you so very, very much for checking this out. And now it is time to be able to go into the rest of the show.